What up, what up? It is Friday, or excuse me, it is now Saturday. Excuse me, that jet lag will get you. September 25th, the morning of week number 4 here of uSTADIUM's University. I'm Zach Berman. This is going to be my last solo show for a bit, or maybe tomorrow will be, because next week I am bringing aboard the second member of this team. You'll learn a little bit more about him throughout the week. Now, however, it's a big week in college football, and it's one of those weeks where none of the matchups, except for a few, look that intriguing. None of them look like it's really going to be that crazy of a weekend, but as we saw last weekend, it's those kind of weekends that get you. It's those kind of weekends that always wind up getting wacky and weird and wild. Let's start with last night and my group of 5 coach, so to speak, and that would be Fresno State. And they hung on. Yes, Fresno State is now ranked after beating UCLA. They also only lost to Oregon by a touchdown in a crazy fourth-quarter comeback. They came back and defeated UNLV 38-30. So the Bulldogs of Fresno State, and shout out to quarterback Jake Haener, who got pretty seriously injured in that UCLA game, still stayed in, won the game, and then proceeded to have another monster game yesterday, threw for almost 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. So shout out to the Bulldogs. What a job that program has done. So first and foremost, why am I out in Boston? Well, for the first time ever, Missouri, my current alma mater, is playing Boston College for the first time ever, and decided to make the trip out for the weekend, and that's my first betting pick of the weekend. Now, Mizzou is favored over Boston College by 2.5 points, and as much as I think it is a coin flip of a game, oh boy, I am sorry if anybody is listening to this that happens to go to my school. I'm actually now the spread went down to Mizzou is only favored by a point, but I'm going to go and take Boston College in this one. So give me BC +1. That's a good upset pick if you want to start the day off strong. Now, a lot of that is also maybe just me being a little bit pessimistic because it's Mizzou, and Mizzou tends to Mizzou all over in the worst way possible. But it's going to be a big, high-scoring game with little defense, and I'm going to take the Boston College Eagles in my first upset pick of the day. Now, for a non-upset pick that I think is a good choice to cover, give me Notre Dame taking the 5.5 over Wisconsin. Now, that game's a neutral site. It's at Soldier Field. The number 12 Irish over the number 18 Badgers. It's the Jack Cohn revenge game for Notre Dame, as he was their quarterback in Wisconsin for a few years. I don't like the fact that Wisconsin seems to struggle scoring against good defenses. And Notre Dame is not Penn State in terms of defensive prowess, but I can't see Wisconsin hanging around in that game for more than maybe 2.5 quarters. So give me Notre Dame to cover the 5.5 over the Irish. Now, A&M over Arkansas, I don't want to predict that game because I think that is a very, very, very – it's going to be a lot closer than people realize. I don't trust Texas A&M's offense. Arkansas's defense is still not tested yet. It's in a neutral site away from any of the crazy atmospheres in either Fayetteville or College Station. With A&M, Alabama, they have 2 weeks from now. A&M's got somebody else next week. I would like to believe that Arkansas possibly pulls the upset. So this is just a non-betting pick. This is just straight up head-to-head. Give me the Razorbacks in an upset. So Arkansas, number 16, to defeat Texas A&M, number 7. Another one that I'm not sold on, and I have waxed on about how I don't believe in Clemson this year. Clemson on the road at I almost said North Dakota State, North Carolina State. That game's at 3:30 on ABC. Clemson's favored by 10. We still haven't seen Clemson be able to score against an FCS opponent or an FBS opponent. They've only put up 16 against Georgia Tech last week. Look for Clemson to get things together today. I think Clemson looks like Clemson for the first time this year. And I think it might take a little bit, but I think eventually they'll figure it out. I'm not too concerned about the Tigers this week, nor am I concerned about Penn State or Georgia. Penn State's got Villanova, so the number 6 team in the land, the Penn State Nittany Lions. Give me them big over Villanova Wildcats. Why is Villanova playing Happy Valley? That's just ridiculous. Also, give me Georgia big over Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt might as well be an FCS school. UMass and Coastal, number 17 Coastal, they roll this week. And that brings me to my next upset. Coming out of the I always got to put the shot to clear. I love that. I love that. Every time I bring up Coastal Carolina, Henry's always so quick with that shot to clear definition. But if we want to stick with the upset predictions this week, I like Baylor over Iowa State. The number 14 Cyclones have not looked convincing in any of their games. In fact, they flat out lost to Iowa. Baylor is a sneaky 3-0. I actually like the Baylor Bears. Down on the banks of the Brazos River in Waco. I had to just make sure I had that for a second. I think the Baylor Bears pull the upset at home. I think Iowa State is one of the most overrated teams in America. And if you're up in Ames, you're going to be looking at, oh, why would you say that? But no, I'm not a believer in the Cyclones. I'm sorry. You know who I am a believer in is the Iowa Hawkeyes. I think they roll over Colorado State. The number 5 Hawkeyes, that's setting up a huge game on October 9th, and I already have every single day leading up to that circle. Iowa-Penn State could be just an absolute titan of a contest on October 9th, so keep an eye out for that one, but they win today. Also, sorry, you New Yorkers, New Jerseyans, I'm not buying Rutgers yet. Now, there are definitely people out there that are saying, hey, I think they have a shot at Michigan. It's a little bit different no matter who you are. Rutgers is 3-0. They've beaten Delaware, Syracuse, and Temple. And they have to now go into this 100,000 capacity stadium in Michigan, and I can't buy the Scarlet Knights. So give me the number 19 Wolverines in a close one. I think Rutgers hangs around. I don't think they pull off the upset. So give me Michigan today. That game's actually going to be, I think that's going to be quite a good game. That's a 3:30 kick on ABC. The night game for ABC is also, I think, a little bit interesting, and I think Oklahoma actually covers the spread tonight. I'm not sold on West Virginia. It's West Virginia and the Oklahoma Sooners. The game is down in Norman. What the spread is here, but Oklahoma has not looked convincing at all. And I think this week will not look convincing. Get it together. So give me OU, but also Oklahoma is favored by 17. Does West Virginia cover that? I don't think they do. I think Oklahoma covers minus 17. So give me Oklahoma in the win and give me them to cover as well. Oklahoma, they have covered 6 out of the last 7 conference games they've played in. It's at night. There's going to be a crazy atmosphere down in Norman. So, yeah, Sooners win, Sooners cover. Even though I'm not sold on Spencer Rattler anymore at all, which is a shame because I really do like Spencer Rattler. Speaking of quarterbacks that I like, Malik Willis and his Liberty Flames last night couldn't pull it off in the Carrier Dome as Liberty lost to Syracuse on a last-second field goal. I did like what I saw out of Willis. But outside of Malik Willis, you really did see the talent discrepancy between Liberty and an ACC team. And Syracuse, a team that I said had the possibility to be one of the worst teams in America, actually looked the part. They looked pretty good. They got their revenge over Liberty. I don't know why Liberty is playing Syracuse. It's definitely up there in one of the weirder matchups you'll find. But good win for the Orange. As for the other ranked games, Auburn rolls over Georgia State. I think Auburn gets their revenge on the poor Georgia State. I think they're the Panthers after losing in Happy Valley last week. So give me Auburn. Also, give me UCLA in a revenge game. I think they have Stanford. Yes, they do. UCLA has Stanford tonight at 6 Eastern, and Stanford's coming off a nice win, and UCLA is coming off a pretty brutal loss, but Chip Kelly's teams tend to bounce back. We saw that at Oregon. He'd always have that one difficult loss, and he'd always recover the next week. So give me UCLA in a bounce-back win, a good performance from the Bruins all around. Because I hate to say it, Stanford doesn't exactly have the world's best home field advantage. So I can't buy the Cardinal here. You know who I can't buy either? Is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I know I rip on them. I know I love to rip on them. I think Michigan State at home in prime time rolls big. Give me the number 20, Michigan State Spartans over Nebraska. That game's 7 o'clock tonight on FS1. Alabama, they'll roll big over Southern Miss. We already know how that game ends. I'm not too concerned about that. Tennessee and Florida. Down in the swamp in Gainesville, number 11 Gators. I think they're going to be pretty upset that they didn't pull that off against Alabama last week. Tennessee, they don't stand a chance. No, thank you. Florida, big. I think by at least 20. UNC and Georgia Tech. That could be an upset. Georgia Tech almost pulled it off against Clemson last week, but I don't see them hanging with Sam Howell and his offense. So give me UNC by 2 touchdowns. Akron and Ohio State. That's a storyline. C.J. Stroud, the Ohio State quarterback, he has struggled the last few weeks. He struggled in that loss against Oregon. He didn't look great against Tulsa. And in fact, C.J. Stroud is sitting this weekend. And I hate to tell you, if you're a Buckeye hater, backup for State, Kyle McCord, I think he's better. You've heard it here first. If McCord winds up starting the rest of the year and the Buckeyes go on some crazy tear, you heard it from me first. I think Kyle McCord is a better quarterback and a better player than C.J. Stroud, and I think the Big Ten's about to figure that out the hard way. So if you're a foe of Ohio State, you can't lose any of these next few games, because I think the Buckeyes, people are writing them off after they lost to Oregon. Too soon to do that. I think Kyle McCord is quite good. But it's sports. You can always be proven wrong. You know what I'm not going to be proven wrong on? Oregon is going to roll Arizona tonight. The number 3 Ducks coming off of a win over Stony Brook against Arizona, a team that lost to FCS Northern Arizona. What the heck is going on down in Tucson? Well, no, it's nothing good. And up in Eugene, the conference opener for the Ducks, the first conference home game they've had with fans in 2 years. Oregon, big. Sco Ducks. Oh, boy. South Florida and BYU. South Florida's not very good. BYU, they are very good. Give me Brigham Young. They go big tonight. Also, Kansas State and Oklahoma State. That's one of those games where it could go either way. I actually think Oklahoma State pulls the upset. K-State I like. I like Chris Kleiman. I like what he's done. I think Oklahoma State's got a little too much firepower for the Wildcats. And that brings me up to players. What players are going to shine this weekend? I'll tell you one. Kayvon Thibodeau on the Ducks. I've already circled him a couple times. He's been hurt on and off to start the season. He's going to be back. He's back 100%. That's at least what Mario Cristobal said. And against that Arizona offensive line, it might be ugly. Like, he might put on one of those performances that's going to have every NFL draft prospect, scout, attendance going, oh, my God, look at what this guy is doing. Kayvon Thibodeau, as I've gone on with Nick before, he is, in my opinion, a more athletic, refined version of Jadeveon Clowney. And against a really bad Pac-12 offensive line in Arizona, it could be a complete and utter bloodbath. So Thibodeau, I'm expecting him to shine. I'm also expecting Jack Cohn to shine against Wisconsin. I think Cohn is going to come out poised, actually a product of Sayville High School. He's a Suffolk County kid. He's a Long Island kid, which I did not know. But Jack Cohn against his old school. I've always been a bit of a doubter on Notre Dame. I still think their time will come, or they lose a bad game, I don't think it's today in Chicago. So I think Jack Cohen has a monster game. That kid's got poise. He's a good talent. He's a lot better than I think some people realize. And I think he puts up big numbers. Also, for somebody that I think is going to put up big astronomical numbers today, who was I thinking of? Treylon Burks, the starting wide receiver for Arizona. Graham Mertz is not the future. Kind of terrible. I'm not a believer in Graham Mertz. I am a believer in Treylon Burks. And if you're an NFL draft junkie and you've never heard this kid's name from Arkansas, he is electric. Treylon Burks is the kind of guy that's going to torture defenses. And on national television today against he is going to just absolutely rake in the accolades. He's nuts. I think he's my wide receiver one, and I'm a draft, just like I'm a fiend for the draft, and you'll see more of that as the season goes on. He is my wide receiver number one. Now, we're 4 weeks into the year, and let's start talking about, if you want me to get into my draft prospects, because it's not really a huge week in terms of storylines, I can absolutely do that. My QB1 is still Malik Willis, and he showed that last night. He's not surrounded by the best talent. He's not playing the best talent. But how many quarterbacks have we seen come into the NFL that have not been going to just like these Alabamas or these Texas A&Ms or these LSUs? I mean, we have 2 quarterbacks that have done serious damage in the NFL that went to North Dakota State. And this year, there's going to be plenty of these quarterbacks. You have Nevada, Carson Strong, Sam Howell. UNC is not a typical quarterback factory per se, unless you count Mitch Trubisky. And if you're a Bears fan, you're probably screaming, Zach, stop, don't talk about him. But Malik Willis is my QB1. I also think this year, for the first time since, I believe, Chase Young, I think we get a defensive Heisman candidate. And I think that is Kyle Hamilton's name that we're going to be calling, safety out of Notre Dame. If you ever watch him play, and he'll be on full display today against the Badgers, imagine a cross between a more athletic Jamal Adams and Troy Polamalu. This kid, wherever the football is down the field, sideline to sideline, in the backfield, you will find Kyle Hamilton. He tackles like a linebacker. He's got straight line speed like a wide receiver. He's nuts. And if you're an NFL drafter, if you're a GM or a scout, you've probably already fallen in love with him if you haven't already. I'll keep going on Thibodeau. I mean, I do love him. But this is also just such an insane edge draft where there are 6 or 7 guys that I think could be legitimate first-round talents out of this edge rusher class. Linebackers, it's an okay class. If you're an offensive lineman junkie like me, then Evan Neal is your guy to watch. He's a better version of Mekhi Becton out of Alabama. But you're not going to get much to really show out of Evan Neal when he's playing Southern Mississippi. That's not exactly the kind of guy you're looking for. But the quarterback class intrigues me. As for cornerbacks, people like Derek Stingley a lot. Obviously, the physical attributes are there for Stingley. Did I mention Army 7.5 versus Miami of Ohio? Miami of Ohio is not a bad team. Do you know the quarterback for Miami of Ohio is? It's actually Blaine Gabbert's younger brother. I don't know why I know that, but forget his first name. No, it's Brett Gabbert. Yeah, Brett Gabbert, the quarterback at Miami of Ohio. Give me the Black Knights. I think Army covers a 7.5. But yeah, actually, I think Army's got a squad this year, especially considering that the other service academies haven't looked great. I think Army gets to run that sector of college football yet again. But just to run back through my picks, I'm going to go Army minus 7.5. Give me Notre Dame minus 5.5, and give me Boston College +1 as the upset. As for my head-to-heads, Oklahoma over West Virginia, Michigan State over Nebraska, and my upset pick of the week, Arkansas over Texas A&M. It's really interesting to see also which coaches I think could be fired. I've mentioned it on the app. There's definitely names that you're starting to think about. And the first one that comes to mind is Mike Norvell. And to say that he's had a disastrous season at FSU, if you're a recruit that's probably thinking of committing out there, I bet you've changed your mind by now. That team, there's a losing culture that is set in Tallahassee. And if you're a Seminole fan, I think that's absolutely horrifying. You can't lose to Jacksonville State, and then you can't get blown out by Wake Forest. Actually, shout out to Wake Forest. Wake Forest is now well on their way to 4-0. They beat Virginia last night. They can score with anybody, and they have the cupcakes of a schedule. There's a real chance they wind up at 10-0 before they get to Clemson. And in a season that looks like it's going to be crazy, the last feel like we've had a season this crazy is 2007. And at the end of 2007, the week of the conference championships, who were number 1 and number 2? Those were Missouri and Kansas. Now, who could be that KU or that Mizzou this year? I think it could be Wake Forest. But back to Mike Norvell, he is on the hot seat, as well as Manny Diaz down the line. His in-state conference rival in Miami, this can't be happening with the Hurricanes. That program has been looking for relevancy since the early 2000s, and they get it in like bits and spurts, and maybe they'll wind up in a New Year's Six Bowl every so often, but that's not good enough for the U. And yes, I think the U has lost a lot of their luster since they left the Orange Bowl. It's not the same program that it once was. It's interesting to notice a lot of those powers in the 90s and 2000s, that like 95 to 05 kind of stretch, they're not really powers. Nebraska, Virginia Tech, Tennessee, Miami, Ohio State's kind of the only one that's still there. Florida State was a power then. Of course, Florida State was also a power in the early 2010s, but that's not the case anymore. Texas, I don't know if Texas is ever going to be a power again. I think them moving to the SEC is just asking to become the next Nebraska. I don't think I've ever really touched on that in this show. Texas and Oklahoma moving to the Southeastern Conference. I like the move for the Sooners a lot more than I like it for Texas. I don't think Texas can beat many of these good SEC teams. And we're going to see that next year, because next year they actually host Alabama early on in the season. And I think Alabama is just going to absolutely destroy them. And it's probably going to start up every hot take on every radio station in America. I'm sure I'll be going, oh, Texas can't compete in the SEC. I'll have that dialed up to full blast. But back to the coaches, I think get fired. Of course, that list starts and ends with Scott Frost. But Scott Frost, his Huskers played well last week at Oklahoma, and I think they have a chance to go into Michigan State and upset him. I also think Mel Tucker is on the complete opposite end of this coaching spectrum, where he is one of the most underrated coaches in America. So as much as I think Nebraska could pull the upset, I don't think Scott Frost is on the hot seat as much as some of these other guys are anymore, because I think that Oklahoma game, which really speaks to how far the program has fallen, I think that has actually bought them some time. So Scott Frost, we get to turn the dial down just a little bit. Other guys in the hot seat, I would already put Jed Fish up there. I know it's been 3 games, but what a disaster. And we do see one and dones in college football occasionally when things get dire enough. And this is already pretty dire for Arizona. I know they didn't have expectations to run the Pac-12 South or to do anything like that, but to go 0-3 with losses to San Diego State, BYU, and Northern Arizona, I mean, that's absolutely pathetic. Maybe just hiring Belichick guys just doesn't work once you actually leave Bill Belichick, and especially for college. Why did anybody think a Belichick hire would work in college football? Like, has that ever worked? I don't think it has. Another hot seat guy? Oh, boy. Jimmy Lake at University of Washington. I was high on Jimmy Lake. I'm pretty full of that already. The fact that he's already talking about making amends with the fan base after they lost to FCS Montana and then got blown out by Michigan. Yeah, I'm not high on Jimmy Lake right now, and I think Washington, in fact, loses their game to Cal, and then his seat gets turned up even hotter. As for someone that I think came into the season on the hot seat, no longer on the hot seat, if he can keep things up, look for a resurgent year for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. I know we've been looking for this for forever, but I think this might be the perfect storm for the Wolverines, a team that came in unranked, underrated, maybe being a little bit slept on. Ohio State at all the hype. Ohio State already loses. And I know people are thinking, oh, well, Michigan's always just going to let Ohio State live in their heads rent-free. But the Wolverines, I don't think they care about the Buckeyes right now. I think they have to wait until November this year. I don't think there's any talk of a revenge tour or anything like that. I think Ohio State is just kind of living in a bubble. Michigan is free to kind of play their own brand of football, which they've needed to do for so long. And it's kind of refreshing. It feels like Michigan's just a different program right now than what we've seen. And yeah, they haven't played anybody of note. Rutgers is going to be a tougher task than some people might imagine, but I still think Michigan beats them by 2 or 3 scores. And if they do that, maybe we could start talking about the Wolverines being a factor in the Big 12 East, or Big 10 East, but also that also factors into Penn State. But Penn State at the same time, I like Penn State. I like this team a lot. I don't trust Kyle Clifford in some of these. I don't trust Kyle Clifford in some of these higher scoring offensive games. Like, he made a couple mistakes against Auburn that he got away with, but Auburn's also not this really big high scoring team. So maybe Penn State survives Iowa. But at the same time, I'm not so sure that Penn State survives Ohio State or even a Michigan. Michigan puts up a lot of points, which is not typical of Michigan. I still think Michigan, they're a 9 or 10 win team, which is a lot better than what people had them at. Could they be much better? They could. They absolutely could. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to eventually figure it out at Michigan. I think he's like Aaron Boone with the Yankees. Just because he doesn't reach that pinnacle in his first few years, it doesn't necessarily mean he is a bad fit. I think you just have to stray the course. Last year with COVID, you can't script that. You can't make that up. That's not exactly something that happens every year. And you have to just roll with the punches. It's not worth firing a guy every year unless you're a New York Giants or New York Jets fan, in which case, yeah, it's absolutely worth firing someone every other year. But I think Michigan has their guy in Harbaugh. I think they would be stupid to let him go, which is why I personally would not have him on the hot seat. Who else would I have on that proverbial hot seat? If LSU loses a couple more bad games, I could absolutely see them firing Ed Orgeron. That's something completely different, because Ed Orgeron, now there's baggage with some of the stuff that's gone on behind the scenes at LSU. If they have a couple more UCLA kind of performances, because they had a couple rough losses last year, Mississippi State. How about Mizzou? You can't lose to Mizzou, not the defending national champions. Look for LSU to make a change. Also, speaking of Mississippi State, Mike Leach's seat in fuego. Now, I thought that was a stupid hire from the jump. Mississippi State is not the kind of program where you can bring some guy in and just have him be super weird and super eccentric, start running the air raid in the SEC. That's not going to fly. It's not going to work. Yes, I know it worked against LSU in the opener last year, but that LSU team was not good. And yes, I understand Mississippi State got absolutely screwed, jabbed, hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, you name it, by the refs in that game against Memphis last week. That shouldn't have even been a game. You shouldn't be playing close games with Memphis. You're an SEC school. And I still just I really don't think he's a fit for the SEC. And it wouldn't surprise me if Mississippi State fires him, Washington State fires Nick Rolovich, and we wind up seeing Mike Leach back in Pullman next year. One quarterback that I haven't talked about yet today is Bryce Young. And actually one of two. I haven't talked about Bryce Young yet. Bryce Young looked impressive last week against Florida. I'm sure he's going to think he always does, or any Alabama quarterback does against one of these cupcakes. Plays good for a half, and then he sits. So nothing really to talk about there. As for Ole Miss and Matt Corral, you know that I love me some Matt Corral. And I do believe Ole Miss has the week off this week ahead of their big, bad game with big, bad Alabama next week. That week, boy, that game is going to be something else. Like, I am over the moon excited for that game. Like, it's that kind of weekend in college football where you're already looking forward to the next week's game. But they're saying probably going to be a whole bunch of crazy that happens. Say, yes, Ole Miss is off this week. Next week, they go to Tuscaloosa, number 13 Mississippi, number 1 Alabama, 3:30 on Saturday, October 2nd. Mark your calendars for that. That should be a lot of fun. But, yeah, right now, you can breathe easy for the time being, Rebels fans. Otherwise, it's really an unremarkable week for college football. Storylines kind of take a lull. You have game day in Chicago for a game between two probable 8-win teams in Notre Dame and Wisconsin. I know. How could you say that about Notre Dame? Yes, I know and I understand. But once again, I'll roll through my picks one more time because I'm about to head off over to Alumni Stadium in Chestnut Hill for Mizzou, BC. To get through them real fast, I have Boston College pulling the upset over Mizzou, +1. I have Notre Dame, -5.5 over Wisconsin. And also, what was my last pick that I had? Am I losing my mind? I'm probably losing my mind. But I have Oklahoma covering the -17 against West Virginia. Upsets give me Baylor over Iowa State, Arkansas over Texas A&M, and one that I think is going to be closer than expected, but they don't pull the upset. Michigan does defeat Rutgers. The Scarlet Knights will play it close. I will be back tomorrow, right back here in Boston to recap everything. Until then, have fun today. Make sure to, keep an eye on what's going on. It's always these weeks that get you. It's always these weeks that catch everybody off guard. And we will see you tomorrow because next week's when things get fun. Get good grades. I will see you in 24 hours.